All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling romantic relationships,
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
specifically from a male perspective.
Okay, I'm listening.
We're going to be looking at this book called Attract Women Inside Her Mind.
The title sounds a little, dated, maybe.
I know, right? A little retro for 2024. But trust me, there's some good stuff in here.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. What kind of stuff?
Surprisingly insightful advice on building stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
That's something everyone wants, right?
Absolutely. Regardless of gender.
So we're going beyond the surface level.
Exactly. Uncovering those nuggets of wisdom that can help us all understand relationships better.
I like it. Challenge some assumptions, maybe.
For sure. One of the first things that jumped out at me was this whole assertiveness thing
Assertiveness, huh?
versus, well, being a jerk.
Ah, that's a fine line sometimes.
Right. The book really emphasizes expressing your needs and opinions clearly and respectfully.
So it's not about steamrolling your partner.
Nope, not at all. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Between being direct but also considerate.
You got it.
Makes sense. It's about strength without aggression, right?
Yeah. And the book gives this great example about using logic and reason when you're talking to your partner.
Instead of just letting emotions run wild.
Oh, tell me about it.
We've all been there, haven't we? In the heat of the moment.
Totally. But this approach is all about taking a step back.
Communicating firmly, but with empathy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that takes practice.
Big time. It makes you think, where is that line?
Between standing your ground and being disrespectful.
Right. Have you ever struggled with that?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you really care about the person.
You don't want to hurt their feelings.
Exactly. But, the book makes this really interesting point about men taking the lead in a relationship.
Taking the lead.
Yeah, and it uses this, get this, Tarzan analogy.
Tarzan. Okay, I'm officially intrigued.
I know, I made me chuckle at first too, but...
So what's the Tarzan analogy all about?
Well, it's this idea that men should be willing to take charge,
Plan dates, make decisions.
Yeah, kind of like Tarzan swinging in to save the day.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But it's not about being controlling, right?
No, not at all. It's more about creating a sense of security.
Dependability, reliability.
Yeah, exactly. Being someone your partner can rely on.
I can see that, but this could get tricky, couldn't it?
How so?
Well, how do you balance that leadership role with giving your partner space?
That's a good point. Autonomy, freedom.
It seems like those two things could clash.
You're right. It's a delicate balance.
Especially in modern relationships.
Definitely. It's not about one person calling all the shots anymore.
It's about sharing responsibility, making decisions together.
Absolutely. And speaking of navigating tricky waters, the book has this insightful chapter on arguments.
Arguments. The inevitable hurdles in any relationship.
Right. And we all have this tendency, don't we, to bring up past issues?
Oh, 100%. It's like we hop in a time machine.
I know. Digging for ammunition to use in the present.
Like, oh yeah, well, remember that time 3 years ago?
Exactly. And the book calls this out as a big no-no.
Why? What's the problem with bringing up the past?
Well, it argues that it rarely solves the current problem.
Instead, it just piles on more hurt.
Resentment, baggage.
Right. And it distracts from the real issue.
Totally. It's like a smokescreen.
Avoiding dealing with the actual conflict.
You nailed it. It's about being present, focusing on understanding.
Not on winning.
Exactly. And that takes a lot of self-control.
Especially when emotions are running high.
For sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that take self-control, the book dives into this fascinating topic. The dreaded maybe.
Ooh, the maybe. I've been on both sides of that one.
Me too. What does the book have to say about it?
Well, it suggests that maybe often masks something deeper.
Deeper, like what?
Hesitation, reluctance, especially with big decisions.
Like marriage, having kids?
Yeah, those life-changing choices. It's like we're afraid to say no outright.
So maybe becomes a shield.
Exactly. A way of delaying the inevitable.
But in the process, we're not being honest.
With ourselves or our partners.
Right. And that can lead to confusion down the line.
Resentment, too. The book even goes so far as to say that a maybe about marriage might actually mean I'm scared to say no right now, but things are unlikely to change.
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
It makes you think, if you're the one saying maybe.
Are you being truly honest?
With yourself and your partner. Because stringing someone along isn't fair.
It's not. And sometimes a clear no, even though it's hard,
is actually kinder.
Yes. It's healthier than a vague maybe.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to open and honest communication.
It always does. Which, speaking of which, reminds me of another point the book makes. Individuality.
Individuality within a relationship.
Yeah, it emphasizes that keeping your own interests and identity is actually crucial.
So it's not selfish to have your own thing going on.
Not at all. It's about recognizing we're both individuals with our own needs.
I love how the book puts it. It says, relationship pants are meant for two.
What does that even mean?
Meaning both partners need to be active participants.
Not just one person carrying all the weight.
Exactly. Shared responsibility and decision-making. But honestly, that can be hard.
To find that balance?
Yeah, between togetherness and individuality.
Yeah.
And the book actually challenges some assumptions about being a supportive partner.
Oh, how so?
Well, I used to think it meant always being available, always prioritizing my partner's needs above my own.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be. But this book suggests that sometimes true support means giving each other freedom.
Freedom to do what?
To pursue individual growth and happiness.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's not about becoming two halves of a whole.
More like two whole individuals choosing to share their lives.
But respecting each other's autonomy. I like that.
And it leads to another key takeaway. Relationship success goes beyond that initial spark.
Right. Remember that line, a spark is easy, a fire is tough?
Oh, I love that.
It perfectly captures the idea that lasting love takes work, commitment.
Nurturing the connection, appreciating the little things.
And keeping things exciting.
Even after the honeymoon phase fades.
Which, let's be honest, it always does. Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we keep things exciting?
Well, the book suggests actively seeking out new adventures.
Adventures? Like what?
It could be simple things, like trying a new restaurant.
Or bigger things, like a weekend trip.
Exactly. Even learning a new skill together.
I like that. And it's all about creating those shared memories.
Those inside jokes, those special moments.
The things that make your bond stronger. Which actually ties into the idea of continuous growth, right?
Growing both individually and as a couple.
You got it. And that brings us to one of the most insightful and maybe even challenging concepts in the book.
Ooh, lay it on me. What's a challenging concept?
The idea that sometimes we need to be a little selfish in our relationships.
Selfish. I thought that was a bad word in relationship.
I know, right? But the book explains it in a really interesting way.
So it's not about being self-centered or disregarding our partner's needs.
No, it's about recognizing that we have needs and aspirations too.
So finding that balance between giving and receiving.
Exactly. Between prioritizing our partners and prioritizing ourselves.
So we shouldn't lose sight of our own needs in the process of meeting our partners.
Right. Taking care of ourselves, pursuing our passions. It actually makes us better partners.
More interesting, more engaged.
Exactly. It's like filling our own cups so we can pour into each other's without becoming depleted.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And that sense of individual fulfillment, enhances the connection, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It creates mutual respect and appreciation. And honestly, when you think about it, sacrificing too much of yourself.
It can lead to resentment, unhappiness.
Exactly. It's not sustainable in the long run. And speaking of avoiding resentment, the book has this fascinating chapter on handling disagreements.
Because let's face it, disagreements are inevitable.
Right. And it emphasizes clear, respectful communication, but
there's more to it.
It also digs into some gender-specific dynamics.
You mean like how men and women approach conflict differently?
Exactly. It suggests that men need to become more attuned to, how women express themselves.
Their needs, their emotions.
Right. It's about developing that emotional intelligence.
Reading between the lines, understanding what's not being said.
It's just as important as what is being said.
Both.
And recognizing that those feminine qualities.
Qualities like nurturing, empathy, emotional expressiveness.
Yes. They're strengths, not weaknesses.
So it's not about trying to fit women into a box.
It's about understanding and respecting their unique perspectives.
Approaching the relationship with curiosity, open-mindedness.
Being willing to learn and grow alongside our partners.
That brings up something I've been wondering about. What about exes? How does the book address that?
The ghosts of relationships past. The book uses this analogy I absolutely love. It says, exes are like SEAL Team 6.
SEAL Team 6. Okay, you have to explain this one.
It means that information about exes should only be disclosed on a need-to-know basis.
So not volunteering every detail.
Exactly. And even then, with extreme caution.
So it's acknowledging that dwelling on past relationships can trigger jealousy, insecurity.
Even in the most secure relationship.
It's about focusing on the present, Building a future together.
Trusting that if there's something we need to know,
our partners will tell us.
Exactly, at the right time. And on that note of trust and communication, let's move to the book's final piece of advice.
Okay, hit me with it. What's the final gem?
It's about the surprising power of absence in a relationship.
Absence. Now that sounds counterintuitive.
I know, right? How can being absent make the heart grow fonder?
Isn't that the opposite of what we're supposed to do?
It seems that way, but it's not about literally disappearing.
Okay, good. What is it about then?
It's about consciously creating space for individual pursuits.
So things like a guy's night out or taking an evening to pursue a hobby.
Exactly. It's about owning our own space.
Both physically and emotionally.
Yes. And allowing our partners to do the same.
And this creates a sense of longing.
Renewed appreciation for what each partner brings.
It's like stepping back from a painting to get a fresh perspective.
You got it. When we're constantly immersed in the day-to-day.
It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly. By creating a little distance.
We remember why we chose to be together.
Precisely. It reignites that spark, that sense of desire.
And we bring our best selves back to the relationship.
Refreshed and recharged. I'm curious, how do you think this applies to your own life?
Well, I think it's a great reminder that it's okay to have our own separate lives.
Separate interests, different friends.
Exactly. And it ties back to that idea of individuality we were talking about earlier.
Prevents that relationship fatigue.
When we're always together, always on.
Makes sense. It's also about fostering individual growth.
Nurturing those passions that make us unique.
Absolutely. We're constantly evolving, and that growth benefits the relationship. So, what does all this mean for our listeners? What's the big takeaway?
That's a great question to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how absence can make the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, giving each other space. You know, one thing that really stuck with me from the book, it's not always about those big romantic gestures.
It's the little things.
The little things, like making coffee in the morning or remembering to pick up your partner's favorite snack.
Those small acts of love.
Exactly. They might seem insignificant, but they show how much you care. When was the last time you actually acknowledged those little things?
That's a good point. I know I can be guilty of taking those things for granted sometimes.
It's easy to do, but the book encourages us to really acknowledge them and express gratitude for those things.
Even if they seem mundane.
Right. It makes our partners feel valued. And it also reinforces those positive behaviors.
Creating a cycle of appreciation.
Exactly. It's like we're training ourselves to see the good, to focus on what made us fall in love in the first place.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the negative, isn't it?
Especially when we're stressed or frustrated. But choosing to appreciate the positive, even during challenges.
It can change the whole dynamic.
Completely. It's like hitting a reset button. Speaking of shaking things up, the book also talks about breaking out of routines.
Trying new things together.
Yes. Remember that phrase, fear the routine?
It's so true. Falling into a rut
leads to boredom and complacency.
And who wants a relationship that feels stale? We all crave that excitement.
Exploring the world together with fresh eyes.
So what does the book suggest?
Actively seeking out adventures.
Like what kind of adventures?
It could be as simple as trying a new restaurant, or as grand as taking a weekend trip.
Even learning a new skill together.
Exactly. Anything that injects a dose of excitement.
Creating those shared memories. Inside jokes, special moments.
The things that strengthen the bond. And you know, this ties into the idea of continuous growth, right?
Both individually and as a couple.
You got it. And that brings us to one of the most challenging concepts in the book.
Well, I'm all ears. Hit me with it.
The idea that we need to be a little selfish in our relationships.
Selfish. I thought that was a bad word.
I know. It sounds counterintuitive.
So how does the book explain it?
It's not about being self-centered or disregarding our partner's needs. It's about recognizing that we have needs too. Aspirations.
Finding that balance between giving and receiving.
Exactly. Prioritizing our partners, but also ourselves.
So we shouldn't lose ourselves in the relationship.
Right. Taking care of ourselves, pursuing our passions. It makes us more interesting partners.
Or engaged.
Exactly. It's like filling up our own cups so we have something to give.
It's a great analogy. And that individual fulfillment, it strengthens the connection, right?
Absolutely. Mutual respect, appreciation. You know, and when you think about it, sacrificing too much.
It can breed resentment.
Yeah. And unhappiness. Which, speaking of, the book has this really interesting chapter on disagreements.
Disagreements.
Yeah. It emphasizes clear communication, respectful, of course, but
If there's a twist,
it dives into some gender differences.
like how men and women approach conflict differently.
Exactly. Men need to be more attuned to how women express themselves.
That needs their emotions.
Right. It's about developing emotional intelligence.
Reading between the lines, picking up on what's not being said.
It's just as important as what I asked being said. And, those so-called feminine qualities,
Nurturing, empathy.
those are strengths, not weaknesses.
It's about understanding their unique perspectives.
Approaching the relationship with curiosity and an open mind. This makes me think about something. What about exes? How does the book address that?
Yes, the exes. Always a tricky subject.
It is. The book uses this analogy. It says exes are like SEAL Team 6.
SEAL Team 6. Okay, you have to explain that
It
one.
means information about exes, it's need to know only.
So we don't need to share every detail.
Exactly. And even then, with caution.
It's acknowledging that dwelling on the past can bring up jealousy.
Insecurity, even in a good relationship.
So it's about focusing on the present, building a future together.
And trusting your partner if there's something important.
They'll tell us.
Right. When the time is right. And speaking of trust and communication, let's move on to the book's final piece of advice.
Okay, I'm ready for it. Lay it on me.
It's about the power of absence.
Absence? In a relationship? I don't get it.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive.
Aren't we supposed to be spending lots of time together?
Right. That's what we're always told. But what this book suggests is that a little distance
Can actually make the connection stronger.
Exactly. And it's not about playing games or trying to make your partner jealous.
It's about having your own space.
To recharge, to pursue your own passions.
And then we bring that energy back into the relationship.
Exactly. It's not about neglecting the relationship at all.
It's about being our best selves for our partners.
And it prevents us from becoming too dependent on each other.
Which can be unhealthy.
Right. Maintaining that sense of independence while still being committed.
So after all these ideas, what's the big takeaway?
I think the book highlights something really important. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to relationships.
What works for one couple might not work for another.
Right. We all have different needs, but the book really emphasizes communication, respect,
And a willingness to grow, both individually and as a couple.
being intentional, making an effort to understand our partners, finding that balance.
Between togetherness and individuality.
It's about recognizing that relationships are a journey, not a destination.
That's a great point. And before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. We've been focusing on romantic relationships, but how might these principles apply to other areas of our lives?
That's a great question. Something to think about.
We'll be back after a short break to explore that further. Welcome back. We were talking about how important it is to have your own space in a relationship.
Not just physically, but emotionally too. At first that idea seemed kind of strange to me.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
I know. Like, aren't we supposed to want to spend all our time together?
Right. Isn't that what a strong relationship is all about? But this book is saying that a little distance,
It can actually be a good thing.
it can actually help the relationship.
It's like that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Exactly. And it's not about playing games or anything like that.
And about making your partner jealous.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that we all need some time to recharge
To do our own thing.
and pursue our passions.
And then when you come back together, you're bringing that energy back into the relationship.
So bringing your best self.
And it prevents you from becoming too dependent on each other, too.
Which can be a problem in the long run.
So it's about maintaining that balance.
Yeah, between independence and commitment.
So after diving into all these different ideas, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
One thing that this book really highlighted for me is that there's no one right way to have a relationship.
There's no magic formula.
No. What works for one couple might not work for another. We all have different needs.
Different expectations.
Exactly. But no matter what, communication is key.
Respect, too.
Absolutely. And a willingness to grow, both as individuals and as a couple.
So it's about being intentional. Really putting in the effort.
To understand your partner, to find that balance between togetherness.
And individuality.
And to remember that relationships, they're a journey, not a destination.
That's a great way to put it. As we wrap up this episode, I can't help but think about how some of these ideas could apply to other areas of life too, not just romantic relationships.
That's a great point. It makes you think, how can we communicate better with our friends and family?
How can we be more respectful of their individuality?
How can we find that balance in all our relationships?
That's something for all of us to think about.
Food for thought.
Until next time, keep diving deep.